Burgermeister.
Whitney, Hoegger.
Emily, Chavez.
Okay, our theorist was Fred Jones, and he was big on behavior management as well. And we found that most successful teachers not only helped students learn, but simultaneously taught them how to manage their behavior responsibly. And found that this combination led to better self-control, less misbehavior, more positive attitudes, and reduction in teacher workload and stress. Here are the books that he's published, most of the work that he's done: Tools for Teaching, Positive Classroom Discipline, Positive Classroom Instruction, and he also designed his video course in 2007 called the Video Toolbox, and he also published a lot of articles in the magazine Education World. Problems that Jones brought to light, that he did most of his research on. He found that a lot of times in the classroom when there were ineffective teachers that there were massive time wasting. So talking, goofing off, daydreaming, stuff like that, basically doing anything but focusing and sitting in your seat. And he found that one or more of those 4 behaviors were present during 95% of classroom disruptions that interrupted teaching and learning. So how to reduce this? He gave many examples, but he said basically clearly communicating class requirements to students, don't do this is going to happen if you do this, stuff like that. Posting rules, establishing and practicing routines, so if the student does something wrong, every time give them the punishment that you told them in the beginning. Student passivity. Jones found that students in typical classes were passive rather than active most of the time, and that brought on a lot of the fact that they didn't want to pay attention. If they're sitting there and the teachers are just feeding them information, then they're not going to want to focus or pay attention, and then they'll get off task. And brought on mostly by teaching method being used, which did not require students to participate actively or show accountability, led to helpless hand raisers as well. Aimlessness. Another cause is that students either had scant knowledge of the procedures they needed to follow or choose not to follow them, resulting in apathy and inaction. Teachers need to take time to teach expectations and procedures carefully. Jones concluded that teaching and enforcing classroom procedures is one of the most important yet most negated areas of classroom management.
Okay, I'm going to cover helpless hand raising. This is where students seem to pay attention and understand well enough when teachers were instructing the first time the lesson, but then after the teacher has instructed them, then they begin to talk amongst themselves and kind of be destructive. So that's when they get out of their seats, they stare at the window, they're not very attentive anymore. Ineffective nagging is as teachers spend a lot of time telling students over and over what they ought to be doing and stop doing what they shouldn't be doing, so it's the nag. An alternative to nagging is to calmly show they mean business more effectively through body language and through verbal language.
So Jones's conclusions about what effective teachers can do. All of the solutions and policies that are out there that we've all heard of are they don't mean anything if we don't know how to put them into effect. How do we do that? So in order to promote active student involvement, purposeful behavior, responsibility, and efficiency, teachers need to establish some of the following rules. One of them, conserve time and don't allow the students to waste it. The best way to manage behavior problems is to prevent them from happening in the first place. So one of the ways that we can prevent time wasting is room arrangement. We want to keep close contact with all the students. We arrange the room so that you as a teacher can circle the room and be close to everybody at the same time. You don't want to make it to where it's like a maze to get through, to cross the room, that kind of thing. And work the crowd. That's something, if students in one side of the room are misbehaving, make sure if you're giving instruction, pause, look at them, make sure that they know that you notice what's going on, and just that eye contact, just that look, the stopping what you're doing just for a couple seconds, that is enough for them to realize, okay, maybe we should get back on task. Classroom rules, there are general and specific. Obviously, the general ones are the ones that we all know. They're the expectations. the guidelines and standards, or the things that you should go over at the beginning of the year. Everyone should agree on them, and then they should be posted, and you should refer back to them and review them throughout the year as needed. The specific rules are more for the procedures and routines, and obviously more specific guidelines that you will go through. They should detail exactly how you want things done and the order and that kind of thing. Those can also be posted, but obviously they're more specific, they're more detailed. But all the students should know them, and you should, again, review them as needed throughout the year. Classroom chores, if possible, we've all heard this, the last group we went over it, assign a role to every student. It helps them feel classroom responsibility. It feels like they have a part in the whole classroom. Opening routines. Jones suggests that at the very beginning of the day, before attendance and tardies and during announcements and that kind of thing, to keep students to not waste time for that. That's the time that a lot of goofing off happens. We'll give them bell work. It could be brain teasers on the board, review problems, it could be just free journal writing, something just to get their brain working to not waste time. Clearly communicate that you as a teacher mean business. Many teachers do not know how to show that they're serious, that they really mean business, that they really want this done. Jones says to use a strategy called meaning business, and basically it's just use of body language. It's how you carry yourself, to make eye contact, tone of voice. It's a very low-key and non-adversarial approach. If you do this right, the right kind of body language with training and practice and everything, you can eliminate the majority of all discipline problems altogether. Another rule is place clearly defined limits on behavior. Limits clarify the line between acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. Body language is the key. Words can often do more harm than good. Like Ashley said, the nag. They just go, okay, you said no, okay, well, what are you gonna do if I don't do it? So you wanna enforce that. Things that you could do to better yourself at this is proper breathing. If you don't know how you're gonna handle a situation, just take a couple deep breaths and then just do what you can and keep moving. Eye contact, I already talked about that. It's one of the most effective ways to stop a situation. Physical proximity, that's something that we talk about all the time in this class. Just walk near the student, let them know that you're there, you know what's going on, you want that behavior to stop. Body carriage, you want to have good posture. If you're drooping and slouching, they will either think that you're scared to address the situation or that just a look of resignation, and if they think that you don't care, they will keep on with the misbehavior and all that kind of thing. Facial expressions, that's kind of the same thing. You can have a look of excitement, happiness, and then that will reflect how your students behave back towards you. And a backup system, just have a plan. If your students are misbehaving, have something, you need to have backup, the power, so they do listen to you. If you have to isolate the student, if you have to do something like that, you just need to have something to back up. What are you going to do if they don't follow your rules?
Okay, we want to keep students engaged in active learning, as we said, so your lessons shouldn't be made up of mostly instruction, because students sit passively for too long and then the urge for something to do builds up, as we talked about before. Effective teachers put students to work from the beginning, so they present the information quickly, then give them something in short intervals. Increase student motivation and responsibility by using incentives. We all know what incentives are. Some examples are watching a video, giving extra credit, free time, stuff like that. Jones says that teachers should discuss with students the nature of the incentives, the kind you will use, and how you manage them. Something that Jones talks a lot about is preferred energy time, and he describes this in many different categories. So one would be Grandma's rule, and this rule requires that students first do the work and then favorite activity. So what they're gonna get after they perform or after they behave well. Student responsibility, properly use incentives help students learn to take responsibility and decisions for their actions. For example, having students coordinate with each other, do group incentive work, stuff like that. And make sure the incentives are genuine. Sometimes teachers say, oh, this is an incentive, but it's a teacher incentive and not student incentive. For instance, the difference between the two, one would be a teacher incentive. If you work really hard, you can be the best class I ever had. That's not really, the students aren't really gonna look forward to that comment. And so, an alternative would be if you work really hard, or the first person to complete a perfect paper will receive 2 bonus points, so something that they want.
This is group-centered impact time management, and this isn't basically you want the whole class to be held accountable for their behavior. So if there's that one kid who's constantly moving around, they have to know that the whole class is going to lose their extra activity time because of that student. So that can become kind of a problem sometimes. Then the class will kind of be like on that person and telling them we're going to lose our time if you don't stop the behavior. But then that also helps bond the class because then they're all working together to keep that student on track. So it kind of works out in the end. It also can be 15 to 20 minutes before class starts or after class, and it's basically to the teacher's discretion. It has to have an educational value or else it's not going to be effective. Some examples were having them read for enjoyment. They're actually reading and they're learning, but they're also doing like what they want to do. They're never left unguided. You have to continue to give them rules that they need to follow. And the big thing is to give them the options, so teachers can give them 4 or 5 choices to choose from, and then they feel like they're in control and they're making choices. This is focusing on rewarding the student that is disrupting the class. So if that student is taking away that time, it mentioned that you can have like a little pat time for that student so they can reward themselves that way, and they can also get time back for their class. And then these are just some responses. Small backup is just letting them know that their behavior is not acceptable. You can just say like, well, we'll begin when everyone's quiet, so not one single student's being singled out, but they can kind of know that they're misbehaving and they need to get back on track. Medium backup is the teacher addresses them in front of the whole class, so this could be kind of embarrassing, but the student will definitely understand that you mean business. So like Kyle, you're staying inside during recess to talk about your behavior. And then large backup responses, that's when the student is going to be reprimanded for something bigger than just disrupting the class. It mentions suspension and all that kind of stuff.
Provide help efficiently during independent work. First, classroom organization is needed. Obviously, organization helps everything run smoothly. Secondly, provide visual instruction plans. Posters have step-by-step instructions, everything that can provide an aid to the students. Thirdly, minimize the amount of time used to answer questions. Answer student questions quickly and allow them to continue working on their own. All of these points will allow for students to work independently on their classwork and